Jasmine West walked confidently down the bustling streets of Chicago, her heels clicking rhythmically against the pavement. The sun bathed the city in a warm glow, highlighting the bright colors of the storefronts and the varied faces of the morning commuters. She had just left a breakfast meeting, her mind still buzzing with the details of a promising new civil rights case that could make waves in the community. Clad in a sharp navy suit that accentuated her professional demeanor, Jasmine felt an optimistic energy coursing through her veins. Today was going to be a good day, she thought, her spirits high as she navigated through the throngs of people. As she approached her office building, a sense of purpose filled her. Jasmine was not just any attorney. She was a fighter for justice, a voice for the voiceless, and she carried the weight of her community's hopes on her shoulders. But as she walked, she suddenly noticed two police officers standing at the corner, their eyes scanning the crowd. A fleeting feeling of unease crept into her mind, an instinctual reaction that she had learned to embrace over the years. Before she could process her thoughts, the officers, Riley and Jenkins, stepped into her path, blocking her way with an air of authority that made her heart race. Their uniforms were crisp, but their demeanor was anything but professional. Riley, a tall man with a broad build, crossed his arms over his chest, while Jenkins, shorter but equally imposing, glared at her with a condescending smirk. "Excuse me, ma'am," Riley said, his voice gruff. "We need to see some identification." Jasmine felt the color drain from her face as she processed the unexpected demand. "Excuse me," she replied, her voice steady despite the sudden tension in the air. "What's the reason for this request?" "Just show us your ID," Jenkins interjected, his tone dripping with impatience. "You fit the description of someone we're looking for." "What description?" Jasmine asked, her composure beginning to crack under the weight of their scrutiny. She knew the implications of their words, the unspoken prejudices that lingered in the air, but she had to remain calm. "Just hand it over, all right?" Riley insisted, stepping closer, his eyes narrowing. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Jasmine held her ground, her heart pounding in her chest. "I have a right to know why I'm being stopped. I'm not a criminal. I'm a civil rights attorney." She emphasized her profession, hoping it would resonate with them. "You have no valid reason to demand my identification." The officers exchanged glances, and Jasmine could see the flicker of annoyance in their eyes. "We don't have to explain ourselves to you," Jenkins snapped, taking a step forward. "Just comply, and this will go a lot smoother." The tension escalated, and Jasmine felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She was acutely aware of her race and how it shaped every interaction she had in a world that often saw her through a lens of prejudice. She could feel the eyes of passers-by on her, some glancing curiously, others quickly averting their gaze. "Is this really necessary?" she asked, her voice low but firm. "What happened to the presumption of innocence?" "I haven't done anything wrong." Riley inhaled sharply, the muscles in his jaw tightening. "You're causing a scene," he warned, his voice low and threatening. "You can either cooperate or we can escalate this." Jasmine felt the anger bubble within her, but she knew better than to let it show. "I will not be intimidated," she replied, her voice unwavering. "You're supposed to protect and serve, not harass innocent citizens based on their appearance." The officers took a step back, momentarily thrown off by her confidence. But the hostility lingered in the air, thick and palpable. Jasmine's mind raced with thoughts of her true identity, undercover federal investigator. She knew that this encounter could spiral out of control, and yet she felt a sense of determination rising within her. "Just tell me why you're stopping me," she pressed, her gaze unwavering. "I deserve to know." The officers hesitated, their aggression simmering beneath the surface. Jasmine could see that they were struggling to maintain their facade of authority in the face of her calm resolve. But deep down, she understood the harsh reality of the situation. This wasn't just about her. This was emblematic of a larger issue, a reflection of the systemic injustices that plagued her community. As the standoff continued, Jasmine knew this moment would define not only her day but potentially her entire career. She would not back down. She would stand her ground and confront the prejudices that threatened to engulf her. In that moment, with the weight of the world on her shoulders, She prepared to fight, not just for herself, but for all those who had been silenced by injustice. Jasmine stood there, her heart pounding like a drum as Officer Riley tightened the cuffs around her wrists, the cold metal biting into her skin. Despite the chaos swirling around her, she fought to maintain her composure, her mind racing with thoughts of what this moment could mean for her future. The sun streamed through the glass doors of the police station, illuminating her sharp suit, a stark contrast to the grim reality she faced. "Ma'am, you are being detained for questioning," Riley said, his tone dripping with authority. "You fit the description of a suspect in a robbery case. Now, give us your ID." Jasmine took a deep breath, the knot in her stomach tightening further. "I understand that you have a job to do, but I am not a suspect. I have rights, and I would like to know what evidence you have against me." "Evidence? You think you can just question us? You're in no position to talk about rights," Jenkins chimed in, his voice laced with condescension. He stepped closer, invading her personal space, his presence overwhelming. "You think just because you wear a fancy suit, you're above the law?" Jasmine's jaw clenched, but she remained calm. "This isn't just about me. It's about the systemic issues that allow such unjust actions to happen. You are making a mistake. You're the one making the mistake, lady," Riley retorted, a smirk creeping onto his face. "You think we don't see people like you every day? You're just another criminal trying to play the victim." Tension crackled in the air, and Jasmine's mind raced, evaluating her options. She knew that one wrong word could escalate the situation. Her heart ached at the realization that, despite her education and accomplishments, her race made her a target in the eyes of these officers. As they escorted her towards the holding cells, Jasmine's thoughts shifted. She was not just any attorney. She was a federal investigator, and this was a violation that went beyond her personal ordeal. She could feel the weight of her role pressing down on her, igniting a fire within her to fight back. Once in the holding cell, the door clanged shut behind her, echoing in the small space. The starkness of the room contrasted sharply with the vibrant life outside. Jasmine leaned against the cold wall, her heart racing, the reality of her situation flooding her senses. She had spent years fighting injustice, advocating for those who couldn't stand up for themselves, and here she was, trapped in a cell, labeled as a criminal. "Is this what we've come to?" she whispered to herself, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. "This is not just about me. It's about every person who has faced this kind of injustice." Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway. Jasmine straightened, her heart pounding in anticipation. Moments later, two of her colleagues from the federal investigation team appeared, their faces a mixture of disbelief and concern. "Jasmine!" one of them exclaimed, rushing to the bars. "What happened?" "I was wrongfully arrested," she replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "They have no cause, and they think they can intimidate me just because of my race." "Stay calm. We're going to get you out of here," her colleague assured her, glancing at the officers stationed nearby. As they spoke, Jasmine felt a surge of determination wash over her. She had the power to fight not only for herself, but for every person who had ever been subjected to such treatment. "We need to expose this. It's not just about me. It's about the system that allows this to happen." Just then, the officers approached, their expressions shifting from arrogance to shock as they recognized Jasmine's colleagues. "What's going on here?" Riley demanded, his bravado fading as he realized the gravity of the situation. "Jasmine West is a federal investigator," one of her colleagues stated firmly, crossing his arms. "You will face consequences for your actions today." The air thickened with tension, and Jasmine felt a sense of vindication swell within her. She had been underestimated, but now the tables had turned. The officers stood speechless, their confidence shattered as Jasmine stood tall, ready to reclaim her narrative and fight for justice. The journey ahead would be challenging, but she was prepared to face it head-on, driven by the resilience and strength she had cultivated throughout her career. Jasmine emerged from the police station, the air thick with tension and anticipation. Outside, the scene was electric. A crowd had gathered, a sea of faces filled with anger, confusion, and a shared sense of injustice. Activists waved signs that read, "Justice for Jasmine" and "End racial profiling," while chanting her name, their voices a thunderous echo that reverberated through the streets. The sun, once a bright companion, now felt like an oppressive weight as Jasmine stepped forward, her heart racing but her resolve strengthening with each passing moment. "Look at this," a woman in the front shouted, holding her phone high. "We're with you, Jasmine. We won't let them get away with this." Jasmine's gaze swept over the crowd, her throat tightening. She hadn't anticipated the outpouring of support. She had felt alone just hours ago, trapped in that holding cell, but now she was surrounded by a community ready to stand with her. It was a moment that could either ignite a movement or fizzle into nothingness, and Jasmine was determined it would not be the latter. "Can I have your attention, please?" she called out, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions within her. The crowd hushed, their eyes trained on her. "I know many of you are feeling angry and frustrated right now, and you have every right to feel that way. I do too." Her words hung in the air, the gravity of the moment palpable. She continued, "Today, I was wrongfully arrested for no reason other than the color of my skin. This is not just about me. It's about every single person who has faced discrimination, profiling, and violence at the hands of those who were supposed to protect us." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, and Jasmine felt a surge of strength. She paced slowly, her mind racing as she tried to articulate the depth of her experience. "This is a systemic issue, one that has plagued our communities for far too long. We need to hold these officers accountable, not just for my arrest, but for the countless others who have suffered in silence." A young man shouted from the back, "What can we do to help?" Jasmine smiled, grateful for the support. "We need to organize, to raise our voices. Write to your local representatives, share your stories, and let's demand change together. We can no longer be silenced." The crowd erupted into cheers, their motivation rekindled by Jasmine's powerful presence. She could see the spark in their eyes, a recognition that they were part of something larger than themselves. Jasmine felt the weight of responsibility lift slightly. They were no longer just protesting for her. They were standing up for justice. As the crowd continued to chant her name, she caught sight of a news crew pushing through the throng. A reporter, microphone in hand, approached her with an eager expression. "Jasmine, can we get a statement for the evening news?" "Of course," she said, raising her voice to connect with both the camera and the crowd. "What happened today is not an isolated incident. It reflects a culture of racism and fear that must be dismantled. We need reform, accountability, and a commitment to change from our police department." The reporter nodded, her eyes wide with respect as she recorded Jasmine's words. "What do you hope to achieve moving forward?" "I want justice not just for myself, but for all those who have been wronged. This is about creating a future where no one has to fear the very people sworn to protect them. We need to work together, unite our voices, and make sure this never happens again." With that, the crowd erupted once more, their chants echoing off the walls of the police station. Jasmine felt a sense of purpose wash over her. This was just the beginning. The fight for justice was far from over, but she was ready to lead the charge. As the rally continued, her phone buzzed in her pocket. A local news station wanted to interview her. Jasmine took a deep breath, knowing this was an opportunity to shine a light on the systemic issues that plagued her community. She glanced at the crowd, their faces filled with hope and determination, and she felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. She had the power to spark change, and she would not let this moment slip away. Jasmine sat poised in front of the camera, her heart pounding slightly beneath her sharp suit. The studio lights were bright, and the backdrop read "Justice Now" in bold letters. She could hear the faint buzz of the crew setting up the equipment, but her focus remained on the task at hand. This interview was not just about her. It was about every person who had ever been wronged by a system that too often overlooked their humanity. The anchor, a seasoned journalist with a reputation for hard-hitting questions, greeted her with a warm smile. "Thank you for joining us, Jasmine. Your story has resonated with many. Can you share what went through your mind during that harrowing encounter with the police?" Jasmine took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Thank you for having me," she began, her voice clear and unwavering. "In that moment, I was terrified, but I knew I had to remain composed. I was being judged not for my character or my qualifications, but solely based on the color of my skin. This is a reality many people face every day. The anchor nodded, leaning forward to emphasize her engagement. You spoke about systemic racism and the urgent need for police reform. What specific changes do you believe are necessary? Jasmine leaned slightly into the camera, her determination palpable. We need comprehensive training programs that address implicit bias and cultural competence. Officers must be held accountable for their actions, and there should be transparent reporting mechanisms that allow communities to voice their concerns without fear of retaliation. As she spoke, Jasmine could feel the weight of her words connecting with viewers. The message was powerful, and she was grateful for the opportunity to amplify it. After the segment aired, social media exploded with support. Hashtags like #JusticeForJasmine and #EndRacialProfiling began trending, igniting discussions across the nation. Back at her law firm, the atmosphere buzzed with urgency. Jasmine gathered her team of lawyers and activists in the conference room, the walls adorned with framed photographs of civil rights leaders. The air was thick with determination as they brainstormed strategies to hold the police accountable. Okay, team, Jasmine began, her voice steady. We need a multifaceted approach. Public pressure is high, and we can use that to our advantage. Let's organize a campaign that not only highlights my case, but also showcases the broader issues of racial profiling and police misconduct. An attorney named Marcus, who had been with Jasmine through many tough battles, raised a hand. What about a petition for community oversight of the police department? If we can gather enough signatures, it could force the city council to take action. Excellent idea, Jasmine replied, her eyes lighting up. We can couple that with a series of town hall meetings, giving people a platform to share their stories. Their voices will be crucial in this fight. As they planned, they felt a collective sense of purpose. This was more than just a legal battle. It was a movement. Jasmine looked around the room, seeing the resolve in her team's eyes. They were all in this together, ready to challenge the status quo. However, the following day, Jasmine received shocking news. As she sat at her desk, reviewing notes for a meeting, her assistant knocked and entered, a concerned expression on her face. Jasmine, I just got off the phone with a source at the police department. Riley and Jenkins have been placed on paid leave instead of being held accountable. Jasmine's heart sank. Paid leave? Are you serious? This is exactly what I feared would happen. They think they can sweep this under the rug? Her assistant nodded, biting her lip. What do you want to do? Frustration boiled within Jasmine, but she knew she had to channel that anger into action. We need to escalate our efforts. I want to draft a public statement condemning this decision. We can't let them think they can get away with this. As the words left her mouth, Jasmine felt a surge of determination. She had come too far to back down now. Let's also reach out to local news outlets. We need to expose this injustice. If they think they can silence us, they are sorely mistaken. With each passing moment, Jasmine's resolve strengthened. She would turn her frustration into fuel, using it to drive the movement forward. Riley and Jenkins may have been given a temporary reprieve, but Jasmine was committed to ensuring that their actions would not go unchallenged. The fight for justice was just beginning, and she was ready to lead the charge. Jasmine West stood at the front of the dimly lit community center, the air thick with anticipation. The town hall meeting had drawn a diverse crowd, a mixture of supporters and individuals eager to share their own painful encounters with the police. Jasmine took a deep breath, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. This was the moment she had envisioned since her wrongful arrest. She glanced at the assembled faces, young and old, black and white, each one reflecting a shared struggle for justice. Thank you all for coming tonight, Jasmine began, her voice steady but full of emotion. We're here to confront the realities of police discrimination and to amplify the voices that have too often been silenced. Her words hung in the air, igniting a spark of hope in the room. One by one, community members stepped forward to share their stories. A middle-aged man recounted how he had been stopped for a broken taillight, only to be subjected to a humiliating search that left him feeling dehumanized. A young woman spoke of an encounter where she was accused of loitering simply because she was waiting for a friend outside a cafe. The testimonies flowed like a river, each one more heartbreaking than the last, weaving a tapestry of pain and resilience that echoed through the room. As Jasmine listened, she felt a collective energy rising, a palpable sense that change was not just necessary, but possible. She glanced at the faces in the audience, noting the tears glistening in some eyes, the clenched fists of others. "We are not alone," she said, her conviction growing stronger. "This is a movement, and together, we can demand the justice we deserve." The meeting culminated in a powerful call for action. Jasmine urged attendees to share their stories on social media, to contact their local representatives, and to support reforms that would hold police accountable. As the evening progressed, the atmosphere transformed from one of despair to a collective resolve, with members exchanging contact information and pledging to stand together. However, as Jasmine left the community center that night, her phone buzzed with a notification. A text message flashed on the screen, sending a chill down her spine. "Back down or else?" The anonymous threat felt like a dark cloud looming over her newfound momentum. Yet, rather than cower in fear, Jasmine felt a fire ignite within her. She knew that her fight was not just for her own dignity, but for countless others who had faced similar injustices. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Jasmine fortified her resolve, meeting with her team of lawyers and activists, planning their next steps. They discussed strategies for public engagement and legal avenues, but Jasmine also recognized the emotional toll this fight could take. "We have to support each other," she reminded her team during a late-night meeting. "This isn't just about the law, it's about healing a community." Despite the threats, Jasmine's determination only grew. She organized rallies, spoke at local schools, and tirelessly worked to keep the conversation alive. Her passion resonated throughout the community, and soon, more individuals began to come forward with their own experiences, emboldened by Jasmine's example. As momentum built, the police department finally announced a public apology. Jasmine felt a mix of emotions wash over her as she listened to the statement delivered by the chief of police. The words seemed hollow, a mere band-aid over a deep wound. She clenched her fists, her jaw tightening. "This is not enough," Jasmine interjected during a press conference following the announcement. "An apology without action is just empty rhetoric. We demand a complete overhaul of the training processes for officers and accountability measures for those who abuse their power." Her voice rang with authority, capturing the attention of reporters and community members alike. The room buzzed with murmurs of agreement. Jasmine's refusal to accept the status quo had galvanized her supporters. She knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but with every step, she felt the weight of her community behind her. They were ready for a revolution, and Jasmine West was determined to lead the charge, unyielding in her pursuit of justice. Jasmine West sat in her office. A sea of files sprawled across her desk, but her mind was elsewhere. The evidence she had painstakingly gathered about officers Riley and Jenkins weighed heavily on her conscience. The more she delved into their records, the more she uncovered a disturbing pattern. Multiple complaints of excessive force, a history of racial profiling, and a trail of unjust arrests that led straight back to their precinct. Jasmine's heart raced with a mix of indignation and determination. This was no longer just about her wrongful arrest. It was about holding these officers accountable for their systemic abuse of power. "Jasmine, are you ready for the meeting?" Her assistant, Maya, poked her head through the door, concern etched on her face. Jasmine looked up, shaking off her thoughts. "Yes, let's go. We can't let this opportunity slip away." The city council meeting was packed. Activists, community members, and local leaders filled the seats, their energy palpable. Jasmine took a deep breath as she walked to the front of the room, a sea of faces looking to her for leadership. She felt the power of their collective hope and anger surging through her, fueling her resolve. "Thank you all for being here today," she began, her voice steady but passionate. "We are gathered not just to discuss my case, but to address a much larger issue, systemic racism within our police department. I have uncovered evidence that links officers Riley and Jenkins to a series of unjust arrests and complaints. This cannot be ignored." A murmur rippled through the crowd, and she could see the fire in their eyes. "I have compiled testimonies and records that show a clear pattern of misconduct. These officers have been allowed to operate with impunity, targeting our communities while facing no real consequences. It's time for a change. The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, glancing at each other. Jasmine could sense the weight of her words pressing on them. Today, I'm asking for your support, she continued, her tone unwavering. We need an independent investigation into these officers and the practices within their precinct. We need to ensure that no one else suffers as I did. A council member finally spoke up. Ms. West, we hear you. We are committed to addressing these issues. However, an investigation will take time. Time is a luxury we cannot afford. Jasmine interrupted, her voice rising. How many more lives must be affected before we take action? How many more families will suffer because of the inaction of this council? The atmosphere in the room shifted dramatically, the tension electrifying. One by one, hands shot up in the audience. I support Jasmine, shouted a community leader. We need accountability. Others echoed the sentiment, their voices rising in a chorus of support. Let's vote, Maya urged, her eyes shining with admiration for Jasmine's courage. After a heated discussion, the council finally agreed to open an investigation. Cheers erupted from the crowd, and Jasmine felt a rush of exhilaration. They had taken the first step toward justice. As the meeting adjourned, Jasmine stepped outside to a throng of reporters and supporters waiting for her. Cameras flashed as she took center stage, her heart swelling with pride. Today marks a pivotal moment for our community, she declared, her voice clear and strong. The system is beginning to recognize the need for change. Officers Riley and Jenkins will be held accountable, and this is just the beginning. Suddenly, the doors of the city hall swung open, and Riley and Jenkins were led out in handcuffs, flanked by officers. The crowd erupted into cheers and applause, but Jasmine felt a mix of vindication and sorrow. This was not just about punishment. It was about healing the deep wounds inflicted on her community. As the officers were escorted to a waiting vehicle, Jasmine turned to the crowd, her heart full. This is our victory, but it's also a reminder that our fight is far from over. We must continue to advocate for justice, for every voice that has been silenced. Later that evening, Jasmine received a call from a prominent civil rights organization, notifying her that she was to be honored with a prestigious award for her relentless pursuit of justice. Tears welled in her eyes as she considered how far she had come and the lives she had touched along the way. Standing on that stage, accepting the award, she reflected on her journey. This is not just my story, she said, her voice steady and filled with conviction. This is the story of every Black woman, every marginalized person who has fought against injustice. Together, we will ignite a movement for change. In that moment, Jasmine knew she had not only fought for herself, but for countless others who had faced similar injustices. Her strength had sparked a revolution, and she was ready to lead the charge. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and watch this next story, which is really exciting.